I hope that I have answers for what you want to ask.
Still, I can hear the game.
That's what it is.
So what was your childhood like?
My childhood was probably like probably a little different than it is now, because now I know it used that we always walked to school. I think most kids now are driven to school.
Well, not me.
So we had quite a long walk to school, and our house was right on the edge of a canyon. The house is still there, and I remember when we were little kids, there was vacant lots when we moved in there in probably about 1925, and there were vacant lots on both sides of our house. So, and we back in those days there was little quail running around in town, and horny toads and things like that you never see anymore around town, you know. And we used to play in the vacant lots, and my dad went to a lumber mill, and he brought home a whole truckload of sawdust and dumped it on the lot, and then we put up a couple of poles and a bar across so that we could do jumping, and even tried pole vaulting into the sawdust. And there were canyons right across the street, and the canyon sides are covered with brush, and morning glory vines were growing and covered the tops of the brush, so it was just like a canopy over all of the area there. But the brush was high enough so we could have caves, and we could run around underneath the morning glory vines. It was just like having our own kingdom under there. Oh gosh. Of course, we walked to school from there.
So what were like your favorite things to do during your childhood? Like what would you like play, or what would you do with your friends, or what would you do when you had time?
Well, we used to hike down to Mission Valley, where the San Diego River runs, and there were gravel pits down there where the local companies, the gravel for making cement, and the sand also, they got out of the river bottom, and the gravel up on the sides, and which left pools in the river, and we'd go down there to swim in the San Diego River. And also fish. There were little fish down there in the river. We go down there and fish for little fish, poor little fish. And I remember back in those days there seemed to be a lot of frogs around, and the frogs would lay their eggs in the same pools that we were swimming in, and there were huge clumps of these little white pollywog eggs. Little eggs, and they turned into pollywogs. And I remember we brought cans full of frog eggs home and put them in a big wash tub, and they all turned into pollywogs, and then we had frogs hip-hopping around all over the yard. So what else can I say? Things like that, and we'd hike in the canyons, of course. And, we'd hitchhike out to the beach. And there used to be a bridge across where the water comes into Mission Bay. There's a picture of that bridge out on my back porch there. I don't know whether you noticed it or not. But we used to fish off of that bridge, so we'd hitchhike out to the beach when we were old enough, when we were maybe 10 or 12, you know, and fish off of the bridge. And we'd even climb down and sit on the timbers underneath the bridge so as to get closer to the water. But we didn't catch very much, but we saw stingrays and small sharks and all kinds of stuff that made it interesting for kids, you know.
Don't see that anymore.
And I remember one day we were fishing in Mission Bay. I had my pole. I had a little pole, and I cast out in, and when I drug the line in, it was hooked onto a soup can. And I got it up on the beach, and a little octopus crawled out of the soup can. And he was probably about, when he was all opened out, he was probably only about that big, but it was that was kind of fun.
So, what was your life like before you married Percy and kind of had kids? And like, what was your family like? Like, what was your family?
Well, first of all, I was the oldest of a big family. In other words, I had 3 sisters and 2 brothers, and we were all living together in the same house. My sister Betty, before I was married, she went to Washington, D.C. and married Jimmy Sweet on the train, and some of the pictures we have are family pictures that we took before she left for Washington. You've probably seen that family picture.
Sure.
But I had a job when I got out of high school. I had a job at Campbell Machine Company, and so I had to go to work every day, 5 days a week. So that took up most of my days. And of course, there wasn't any television in those days, so we used to go to the movies quite a bit more often than you do now. In fact, we would go to, when I'm reading my diary now, it seems like we'd go to the movies about twice a week at least. You know,
wow.
I had a pal named Harold, and he and Frank and my brother Frank and my cousin Ron Powers, and we'd go to a show a couple of times a week, because we were, all 3 of us had jobs. We were just out of school, and we were all working enough so that we could afford to go to a movie, you know. So we went to movies, and we went to ball game occasionally, and got together and played cards once in a while, and not very often. But I don't know how that's different than how it is now, but I don't think I ever had I didn't start dating even until I got out of high school. I never had a girlfriend in high school.
So I believe you were around during the Great Depression, is that right? Or you were around during the Great Depression?
Well, when I was born in 1917, and the stock market crash that was the beginning of the Depression happened when I was almost 12 years old, at the same year that I became 12 years old. So things got worse from then on, and things got a little bit tight with our family. My dad had his own business, and his business was he had a truck, and he had a whole string of. In those days, there were a lot of small grocery stores scattered around all over town, and he supplied the produce. Took the produce. He'd spend the evenings on the phone taking orders from his grocery store owners. Then he would go down to the market early in the morning and buy the produce, oranges and apples and vegetables of all kinds and everything else that they ordered, and haul them up and take them and deliver them to the grocery stores, and then he would make a profit on that. Sometimes he would buy oranges or fruit that was just fresh off the tree, and there would be all different grades in the same box, and he would take fruit and he would separate it, and like tomatoes, he would take all of the, you might call them culls, out and separate them from the real nice tomatoes, and then he would sell the better ones at a higher price.
Sure.
So he did like that to make more profit than usual. And I remember I used to go down with him when I got a little older, when I was 10 or 12, and I'd go down in the morning with him, and he would go to the markets, to the wholesale markets, and buy the stuff, and I would carry it, put it on a hand truck, or carry it down to the truck, and then he would pile it up by the truck, and then when he came out, well, he would load it on the truck, and we'd go off. And this is all before school, so we'd get up to the first market. Was only a couple of blocks from where I went to school, and there's a little cafe there where they had pancakes and stuff, and I'd eat my breakfast in the store, and then from there I could walk to school, and then from there, of course, I'd walk home again after school. But that didn't go. I think when I was doing that was only on periods like when I had a new brother or sister being born, and Dad was taking care of me. You know, during that period when my mom was out of commission for a while. Going down to the market to help him wasn't an all year long job. It was just during certain little periods where it worked out. You know?
Sure.
And it was up to Dad to take care of me while Mother was having a newborn.
Wow.
But I had that would only be during the last ones, of course. When Marie was born and when Dick was born. Dick was born in 1930 when I was 13 years old, and I think that was one of the periods when I was going with my dad. And what else can I tell you?
So by the way, Thomas, this will have to be the last question because you're going to run out of tape. So pick your best one.
I've been doing too much talking.
No, you're doing great.
So what was I know you worked on battleship stuff. Like, what happened during World War II with you? Like.
Well, the one that I remember the most was a cruiser, and I think it was the San Diego. I think they were named after the big cities. And and I worked on this cruiser, and what had happened was they had cables running around and around the ship, like a coil around the ship, to deactivate it from setting off a magnetic mines.
Oh, sure.
Magnetic mines. And on this cruiser, they got in one of their battles, and it had wrecked the degaussing system, and I had to go to the officers' mess, and there was a huge a connection box fastened up to the ceiling in the officers. Not the officers' mess, it was the officers', what do they call it? Like a big, huge living room where they went to in the evening. Sat up on a scaffold working overhead and resplicing wires that had been rerun to get that degaussing system all back in order. And then while we were there, we were able to eat in the chief officer's mess, and I remember they had a huge vat that was like a stainless steel pot that was big enough to get inside of and stand in practically, and they had it full of oyster stew. And I would and I'd reach down with the ladle down the bottom and get